Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are acing articulations. Now, I do want to reiterate one concept that I talked about in the introductory video of Conquering Finale, in that in Finale, certain tools go a little bit beyond the scope of what they're called, and the articulation tool is a great example of this. The articulation tool is in the main tool palette here. It's this little whole note with an accent over it. Now, the articulation tool will encompass more than just articulations, musically speaking. So, yes, you'll be able to get staccatos and accents and all that sort of stuff, but you also be able to add ornaments, fingerings, and trills, and fermatas, and all kinds of other stuff. And I think the better way to think about the articulation tool is that it's a tool that will allow you to attach a musical element to a note or rest. Now, obviously, that name would be too long, so they just call it the articulation tool, but it definitely encompasses more than just articulations from a musical standpoint, okay? So let's start adding some articulations to this file I have here. So when you select the articulation tool, with the selection tool, you just see you get a regular pointer. The articulation tool will give you a crosshairs. Now, this crosshairs has a couple of features to it. There's an arrow, first of all, pointing down, and if you go below a staff, it'll point up, and if you keep going down, it'll start pointing down. And when you get close to a note, you'll get a little icon next to the crosshairs, a little note, and that'll indicate that it is prepared to put an articulation on that note that it's pointing to, right? So it is kind of a little bit critical about where the cursor is in terms of when you're going to add it. In practical purposes, it's just as long as you get close, you'll get the articulation. All right, so to add an articulation, it's very simple. Just get to the note you want and click. And the articulation selection dialog box will appear, and this will encompass your library of articulations that you can use. And you'll see right away what I was talking about. You have actual articulations, musically speaking. And then you have things like trills, and here's some ornaments over here. You can scroll down. You've got some tremolos stuff, fermatas. There's a roll. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and there's also a bunch of different shapes that you can attach to certain to notes as well. All right. So once you clicked on a note, you bring up the articulation selection dialog box, and it's simply a matter of selecting the one you want. So let's put a staccato, and then press select, or just press return to get out of that box. All right, let's choose the staccato, and you're good to go. We can choose the accent, and we're good to go, right? Easy enough. You can also add articulations to rests. Now, this would be handy not so much for an actual articulation. You wouldn't necessarily want to put an accent over a rest, but you can put a fermata over a rest, which would be useful, right? So that's how you would do that. Again, it will allow you to do inappropriate things. So if you can actually choose to put an accent over a rest if you really wanted to. So you can do that. Again, it's just thinking about attaching an element to a note or rest, and it's really any element to any note or any rest. All right, so that's just how that functions. There's another way to add articulations en masse. You can just drag select, and you'll get a selection like this, right? And actually, we can even go downward, so we can actually select both the violin and the cello part, and get all of those notes in a selection. And then when you release, we'll get a different window called the Apply Articulation window. And now the first part of this will say articulation and give you a number. And if you press select, we'll pull up that same dialog box, the articulation selection dialog box that we had before. And now from here, you can select any articulation you want. Choose the accent and press select. And it will change that number. And that number just corresponds to this upper left-hand corner number. It's just a number, whatever articulation is in that slot, right? So 5 for accent, 1 for staccato, right? So select 1, and the 1 shows up there. And apply to all notes. So let's just do that for now, and click OK. And you'll see that it puts the staccato on all of the notes there, right? That second option right below all notes. Notes within range of duration. Now, this will allow us to filter out for certain durations. So in this example, this fourth measure here, let's say we want the staccato notes only on the 8th notes and not on the 16th note. So we can choose notes within range of duration from the 8th note through the 8th note. If I were to choose from 16th note through 8th note, it would put it on 16th and 8th notes, and that's not what we want, right? We just want 8th note to 8th note. and click OK. And now you'll see that the staccatos get put only on the eighth notes. Just zoom in a little bit there. You can see that a little better. All right, so that's kind of handy. There's another option there. I'm going to go down here to this piano part where I have some ties. There are some tie options there. And right here it'll say include notes that start a tie and notes that continue to end or end a tie. And it's fairly self-explanatory. With these checked, you know, this is the default state of this apply articulation box, notes that start a tie, because more often than not, that's probably going to be the way you want it. If I put an accent here, you know, you're going to want the accent only on the first note. But we can force Finale to add it to the other note, which might be more appropriate for, say, a fermata. Choose a fermata, and we have that second option checked. So now it'll put it on both notes, and you'll see that you can get your fermata on the end of the tie as well, right? And theoretically, we could uncheck both of them and put an articulation only on a note that doesn't have a tie attached to it in either position, right? And that would only put it there. So it's there to use. I'm sure you can find uses for all of those options and variations of those options. Very flexible in that manner. And then there's finally this bottom part of it, additional positioning. Now this will just allow you to, you probably don't need to mess with this too much, but this will just allow you to enter some values here. -0.2, and it will add some additional positioning to the articulation. Now in this case the staccato is way off to the left, which is probably not what you want, but it's available to do that. All right. So that's dragging to add articulations on Moss. We can also use Metatools with articulations, and I strongly encourage you to learn what these Metatools are and really get to use them, because this will speed up your workflow so quickly. And the way a Metatool works is you'll hold down a letter or a number on your computer keyboard and then click the note. So I happen to know that S is for staccato, so if I hold down the S and click that D in the cello, it will add a staccato. If I hold down A for accent, I'll get an accent there, right? And we can, if we know the Metatools, we can really quickly kind of add a whole bunch of them. All right. We can also drag with a Metatool engaged. So if I hold down the A key for accent and drag this whole measure in the cello, I'll get accents on every single beat. All right. Now there is one thing to note about dragging versus single clicking in articulations. You can't, dragging will not put articulations on rests, and this is kind of handy. I'm just going to show you this. Let me just delete these. This is kind of handy in a passage like this where, you know, if you want to put staccatos on all of these notes, obviously you're not going to want it on the rests. So Finale's default is that it's going to, you know, it's going to ignore the rests only when you drag. Again, if you just do a single click, you could actually put a staccato on the rest, right? You probably don't want to do that, all right? And it's the same thing with this type of drag without a Metatool selected using the apply articulations. Choose all. It will not put it on the rests, all right? So slight difference between single clicking in articulations and dragging articulations when rests are involved, all right? Oh, one other thing about Metatool, very important. I almost forgot about this. So if we have an articulation here, say an accent here, and we decided that's wrong, we want to change that accent to a staccato instead, we don't have to delete it and re-enter it. All we have to do is, with it selected like that, double-click the Metatool. So if I want a staccato, double-click S, and it'll change it to a staccato magically. Double-click A, right? And we can do this with any Metatool that we know. We can double-click F to get a fermata, E to give us a tenuto, etc., right? And even like a bunch of them. So if we have staccatos on this whole section, we can drag to select them all, right? And then double-click A, and they'll all change to accents, all right? Handy little thing to know. And then finally, with Metatools, we can also reprogram Metatools. And I happen to know that, I should have pointed out that if you don't know what the Metatool is, the keystrokes will appear in this articulation selection dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of each box, right? So you'll see the S here for staccato, E for tenuto, A for accent, etc. And I can tell you this is Finale's default setup for articulations. and every single letter and every single number is currently occupied except for the letter Y for some reason. And there are some articulations that don't have Metatools. There's nothing in the upper right-hand corners for most of these shapes here, or actually all of these shapes. But if you did want something like that, first of all, if it doesn't have a Metatool, you just have to select it from this articulation selection dialog box. But we could program the Y to this articulation. And the way to do that is to get out of that box. So we're just in the articulation tool, and you're going to press Shift plus the letter or number that you want to program. So in this case, I'll press Shift Y, and the articulation selection dialog box will appear, and then we find the articulation that we want to program. So in this case, we're going to select that one, and now press Select. And nothing will happen in your score here, but you've just programmed that. So now if I hold down Y and click there, I'll get that shape there, right? And you'll see that when we go back into this dialog box that the Y appears in the upper right hand corner, just indicating that I've programmed that. And you can reprogram too. So for example, the J is set to this particular ornament, but if there's something else that you want to use that doesn't have a meta tool that would be more useful than that, just go out of here and press Shift J and then select something else to reprogram that particular keystroke for whatever articulation you want. All right. So deleting, you probably saw me doing this a bunch. So if I just add a bunch of articulations here, deleting is easy. You can just select them individually and just press delete, select individually, press delete, or you can kind of drag select to select a whole bunch of them and press delete. All right, fairly simple. Same thing with the, you can do this right from the selection tool. Just, click on it. You can't drag select articulations in that manner, but you can select individual articulations if you're careful enough and do it that way. Similarly, there's one other thing you can do to clear out articulations, which is kind of handy with the selection tool. Just select the measures, and this will be handy if you've got measures upon measures of articulations that you need to get rid of, right? Just select the passage that you want. Go to Edit, find Clear Selected Items, choose None, and what we're doing is filtering for articulations, and then find Markings Articulations and check this. And so we're only clearing articulations, and click OK, and it will get rid of them. All right. So that's deleting articulations. There is a couple special articulations I want to talk about, just to point out. And one of them is the roll. Now there is a roll articulation in here, and it's down here. It looks like this, and the meta key is R, right? So let's just do that with the R. And with the roll, it does matter where in the chord that you click. If you press R and click towards the top, you'll see that it goes way up here, and that's sort of not right. So what you want to do with the roll particularly is get down towards the bottom and a little bit to the left as much as you can to put it in the right place. Because if you go too far right as well, it'll also kind of not put it in a good position. So just somewhere over here, all right, we'll put it in a good position. And one of the special things about the roll is that you will get two handles. I don't know if you can see that real well, but there's two handles here, one here and one at the bottom. The top one will allow you to move the roll around, and the bottom one will actually allow you to extend it and shorten it. All right. Most other articulations will only have one handle, right? But the roll is a special articulation that has two handles, okay? And also the tremolo. The tremolo does something special as well, and the 8 would be the tremolo. You get the 3-stroke tremolo. I think 6 and 7 will give you 6, 2 and 1. 7, or 6 for 1, 7 for 2, 8 for 3. But in certain circumstances, the tremolo will extend the stem or the beam. So in this case right here, if I were to put it on this G, you'll see that the beam gets extended to make room, right? This chord here in particular, the stem's a little short. If you put the roll, it'll actually extend the stem a little bit, all right? So that's a special property about the rolls that are attached to the stems, okay? And then finally, let's talk about layers. I do have this section set up here in bar 5 and 6 in the piano with a couple layers. The one thing about layers and adding articulations is that it does sometimes matter what layer is active. And in this case, I have layer 1 active here, and you see it's down here, it says layer 1. And so if I just with a single click, either going through the articulation selection or with a meta tool, the articulation will only appear on the active layer. So if I try to put an accent on these eighth notes, nothing's going to happen because the layer 1 is active, right? So we'll only add it to layer 1. If I wanted to put it on the eighth notes, I'd have to switch to layer 2, and then put staccatos on these eighth notes, right? But it won't allow me to put anything on layer 1. Actually, if I try and do it right here, it's actually putting that staccato on the eighth rest, which is inappropriate, right? However, that's with single clicks. If you were to drag select and using either without a meta key or with a meta tool, it will apply to all layers, right? So again, apply articulation tool comes up, all notes, and it applies that staccato to everything. Same thing with a dragged meta tool. So if I drag accent here, you'll see that it'll appear on all the notes in both layers, right? That's just something to know about how layers work. There is a couple interesting, neat little tricks around this, by the way. So one of them, for example, is if, in this example, let's say I want accents on layer 1 and staccatos on layer 2, right? So what I can do is actually use that apply articulations dialog box and filter for durations in this particular case, right? We choose 5 for accents. Notes within range, we only want it on the half notes, right? So we'll just select half notes and click OK, and you'll see that it only put it on the half notes. And then we can go do the same thing. Again, it doesn't matter what layer is active at this point. Drag through these 2 bars and choose staccato number 1, right? Notes within range, only the eighth notes, right? From eighth note to eighth note, OK. And you'll see that we can actually do a quick little trick to put different articulations in different layers there, okay? And there's another way to do this, by the way. In the document menu, there's an option called Show Active Layer Only. So if I check that, it's going to make the other layers disappear. So only layer 1 will show. So now I can use the meta tool, A, and drag, and get the accent only on layer 1, and then we could switch to layer 2, right? So now we're only showing layer 2. Layer 1 is invisible for the time being. Press S for staccato, drag through these bars, and get the staccatos, right? And now when we go back and uncheck Show Active Layer Only, you'll see that I got my articulations correct by doing it that way, all right? And the other trick to this is that we can actually clear out articulations in the same manner, right? So if we have this passage here and we only want to clear out the layer 2 articulations, again, just choose document Show Active Layer Only to just show the layer 2, and then select these bars, edit, clear selected items, articulations, right? Okay. And now just the layer 2 articulations get removed. If I were to do that, let's just undo that. If I were to do that here with both layers showing without the show active layers, if I were to clear selected items, articulations now, it would clear it from both layers, all right? So there's a couple tricks there to help you with putting in and removing articulations from layers, all right? Let's see. I think I covered everything, just double checking my notes. Yeah, good to go. So that's adding and deleting articulations in Finale. So I hope this has been helpful. Come back for a few more lessons on acing articulations. We'll talk about the next lesson. We'll talk about stacked articulations and moving and flipping articulations as well. So, all right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.